If you enjoy decent football, Notre Dame and Texas A&M saved the day. Not a scintillating display of college football on this day. Important games, yes. Important results, yes. Good games, no. Awful football today. But we still love college football, and we are so glad that it's back. Unfortunately, the marquee matchup, save one, did not deliver. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. If you are joining us for a first time in season, this is what we do each and every Saturday night. So make a date with us following the primetime games and get set, buckle in, leave your comments and questions there in the chat. I will get to them. The Super Chat's available. And of course, Venmo, PayPal, and a Cash App to contribute to the show as well. And we will be here to take your calls. We've left the call-in line in the chat. All right, here's what's important today. I made the statement a number of times throughout the week that the most important game to any particular team this entire weekend was Notre Dame. And I laid it out, stated the reasons, and Notre Dame came through. It was not pretty. It was not pretty on offense. Credit the offensive line in the fourth quarter. They started to lean on Texas A&M. 6 career starts out of this offensive line coming into this game, going to Kyle Field, taking on one of the best defensive lines in the country. Notre Dame's offensive line stepped up to the challenge. Their running game finally came through. Riley Leonard, more runner than passer to a certain extent. He came through. The Notre Dame defense was excellent on this night, and they slugged it out in the heat at Kyle Field. So Notre Dame picks up a huge win. Miami earlier in the day, maybe the most impressive of the wins, considering Georgia's a given. So out of the teams that we had questions about, Miami, the most impressive. They brought it all. They dominated that game from the beginning. They did not extend the lead and really break away from Florida until after halftime. But from the opening gun, from the first play of the game, Miami was clearly the better team. They've got the best quarterback in the conference. They've got the best offensive line, running backs, wideouts, weapons total. They've got the best defensive front. They have most of the best position units in the ACC. And look at the way Florida State and Clemson have started their seasons. Miami has a clear path. They look to be the best team in the ACC. And if they can't win this lousy conference this year, then I don't know when they will. But they were by far the better team in the swamp today after Montrell Johnson tore off a 71-yard run to get it to within 17-10. Miami just took it from there. Cam Ward made one blunder in the first half that led to a field goal, but the Miami defense continued to bail everyone out. And Cam Ward, other than that, showed off his arm talent and won what was not a duel with Graham Mertz. Ward, clearly the better quarterback, although he had the better offensive line that kept him clean throughout the day. So huge win for Miami, dominant. Did not expect that. I thought Miami would win the game, even though I picked Florida in my picks. I just kind of stuck to my guns through the offseason. Probably shouldn't have done that in a couple areas because I distinctly felt as though, and stated a number of times over the last few days, Miami's the better football team. Decidedly the better football team. I did not think by this much. Earlier in the day, Penn State made a statement. Is West Virginia an excellent football team, a playoff-worthy team, or anything close to that? No. Penn State is not going to be able to prove itself until much later. USC's down the road. Ohio State's down the road. But they went on the road in a difficult environment against a capable team, and they were clearly the better team. You could take the Miami effort and you could take the Penn State effort in regards to the level of dominance and the gap between the two teams, and it was pretty much the same display by Penn State. Drew Aller, excellent. He looked fiery. He looked poised. So he looked fiery when he needed to be fiery to fire up his teammates, get in the opponent's face a little bit. He was poised when he should have been poised. He missed on his first few wide open throws, and then he locked in and he delivered. Let's keep in mind, however, Drew Aller threw for 325 yards and 3 touchdowns against this same West Virginia defense last year. and then he fell apart in the big games against Ohio State and Michigan. We shall see. The running back tandem of Penn State's Nick Singleton and Katron Allen had off years as sophomores. They suffered that sophomore slump together last year. They have vowed to mount a comeback, and Nick Singleton was excellent today. The Penn State defense is one of the best in the business. Speaking of which, Michigan, the best defense in the business in 2023, needed that defense. They started Davis Warren at quarterback. So the thought process over the last month is that Alex Orji would be the starter, but there have been rumblings here in the last week that it would be Davis Warren. In fact, it was. Orji did see the field, completed a pass, ran the ball 5 or 6 times, but it was Davis Warren. He played okay. I did not see much of that game. I was locked in on Notre Dame and Texas A&M. I flipped to Michigan a few times to see some big plays, and the biggest when Fresno State would not go away. They were 12 yards away from making it a one-score game, down 23-10. Will Johnson picks off a pass, maybe made his first huge stride in winning the Thorpe Award tonight. Will Johnson went 86 yards for a pick six to end Fresno State's threat. So Michigan survives 30-10 in a much closer game than the score might indicate. Kalen DeBoer's team rolled. Ton of mismatches, as is typical in week 1. Anything else out there of note we will get to with all of you. Let's get to the calls. Here we go. The call-in lines in the chat. And again, I will answer your comments and questions there in the chat as well. Here we go. Our first caller is Buckeye Battle Cry.
How's it going there? How's it going, Mark?
Fine. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Man, Ohio State, I want to talk about first, and then obviously get to Michigan, and then wrap up with Oregon. I think Ohio State obviously clearly struggled out of the gate a little bit. It took a little bit to settle down for Will Howard. First time in front of a big crowd like that. And J.J. Smith dropped his first super easy pass, but then performed admirably well the rest of the way. And then from there on out, post halftime, Ohio State really rolled and took care of business like we expected them to. Maybe not as quickly as we expected them to, but they certainly took advantage of their athleticism and their speed and their power on the line. Now the one criticism I do have for the Buckeyes, though, is that I wasn't overly impressed with the run blocking so far from the Ohio State line, and that is the kind of the big complaint that us Buckeye fans have had over the offseason. Is the O-line in this new scheme going to improve? What are they going to look like? How are they going to perform in Chip Kelly's offense? And I don't believe we had a 100-yard rusher today in either Judkins or Henderson. And you would think we would have overpowered Akron's defensive line quite easily, but that didn't quite happen, didn't quite materialize. So they still have a little bit to prove, but obviously game 1, and we'll see how they do. And Donovan Jackson was out, so that, that is an interesting dilemma there, but we'll see how they perform the rest of the season. But one thing I do want to say about the Michigan game, transitioning to that, is that it's going to be fun to watch the Michigan Wolverines again this season, from a Buckeye perspective, that is. Their offensive line struggled massively to get any kind of a push against a Fresno State D-line, group of 5 D-line. And I heard all off season, smash, smash, smash. That's sounding a lot like Speed in Space and Josh Gad. It's just a motto. And maybe a thing that's a foregone era with Harbaugh leaving. Maybe that left with him. I know they have 5 new starters, of course, and I know they will be better on the offensive front by the time they face our Buckeyes. But wow, what an underwhelming performance from the front 5. And let's talk about the wide receivers too, because Colson Loveland seems to be their only threat out wide, and they certainly were creative in moving him around tonight, which I commend them for, of course. It was interesting to see them in a 5-wide set. I don't know if we ever saw that under Jim Harbaugh, so that was interesting. A new wrinkle for them, of course. But my goodness, I think their second leading receiver had less than 15 yards. Morgan and Morris were essentially nowhere to be seen. And they're speedsters, so you'd think they'd get separation against Fresno State corners and defensive backs. That was not the case. Will Johnson actually, until that highlight reel pick six, he got burned a lot tonight, folks. Let's be real about that. He gave up 100 yards to Moss, and yeah, he redeemed himself certainly with the pick six. But my goodness, Michigan underperforming today in game one, and as we look forward to Texas next week, coming to town for the first time ever in the Big House, I would be quite worried if I was a Wolverine fan.
Well, I saw just about as much of Ohio State and Akron as I did Michigan and Fresno State, which was probably 10 or 12 plays. So I didn't sit there and watch the games. I was watching other games, and I would say that based on what I saw, based on what I read, based on other people's comments, looking at the box score and all that other business, and the flow of the game, and at what point each team was able to break away, I can't really draw a conclusion as to who underperformed more, Ohio State or Fresno State. Obviously, Ohio State had an easier win by far, but they played a much worse team, although Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson were touting Akron, and again, I only checked in. I watched more than a dozen plays. I watched a little bit more than that, but they, it sounded like they were talking up Akron like they were, I don't know, the 95 Huskers or something. They were talking about that they're talented and all these other things. Well, unless they've improved immensely, they were arguably the worst FBS team in the nation last year. But I'm not concerned except for what you just brought up with the offensive line. And if the offensive line had been exceptional the last few years and brought all those starters back and then they struggled today, I wouldn't be concerned. But that's not been the case. So you're right, not getting the push against an inferior defensive line. But Michigan suffered the same thing, although you would think that Fresno State would have a significantly better defensive front than Akron. You would think. I don't know. I've not scouted every unit.
I would agree.
I don't know about that, but they should. But yeah, for Michigan to only have 16 points on the board into the fourth quarter. And I saw a couple of those Will Johnson plays that you're talking about, although one of the big gains down the sideline was just an excellent pitch and catch. He was hand fighting with a receiver. He was right there. The wideout just separated at the last second and made a great catch. And him jumping that route, that's fairly special. You don't see
that's film study.
And then they kind of like Ohio State, they started to lean in the fourth quarter and started to get Khalil Mullings going finally.
Yeah, well, I turned to my buddies who we had a watch party with today, and I said, let's see how Michigan responds to Fresno State bringing it within 6. Do they come out with an attitude and answer, or do they start to let the pressure get to them a little bit? Now it's a tight game late in the fourth quarter, and to their credit, they did respond, and they did match on that drive. But the one interesting thing to come out of that possession, well, really the whole game, is that Donovan Edwards only had 27 yards rushing. And Rob and I predicted on Buckeye Battle Cry here that he will not be RB1 by midseason. And it honestly seems like he'd maybe not be RB1 already in this game. Khalil Mullings, to me, was more impressive than Edwards last year, except in the national title game, of course. He was a key factor in their win. But yeah, Mullins got more carries, and he looked a lot better. I think Edwards averaged 2.5 yards per carry, and I think Mullins had maybe over 6 yards a carry. So there's a difference when he's in the game.
Yeah, I've wrestled with Steve Dace a few times on this one over the summer. And basically said, I get it. When Donovan Edwards is right, whatever that is, between the ears or just feels right that day, or maybe he's one of these players that has to be 100% healthy to really get rolling or whatever it is. Yeah, if you take his 5 or 6 best games in college,
Right.
he's the first team All-American. But and he looks better than Blake Corum at
Yeah.
his very top end. His ceiling is better than Blake Corum, but Blake Corum was out there whether he needed to carry it 18 times or 28 times or 32 times. He was going to be the same guy or even better in the fourth quarter than he was in the first quarter, and when it really mattered. And I got to say, I didn't see Donovan Edwards carry the ball. The couple drives I saw was totally Mullings. And I looked at the box score like you, and I was like, wow, this is not a way to get a lot of people have predicted that he would make a push toward the Heisman Trophy this year. This is not a good start to that.
Yeah, he certainly had a lot of hype, obviously being on the cover of the video game and how he played the last game of last season. People are high on him, but I think you and I were right in that, in feeling that Edwards isn't quite an every down back for the Wolverines. And I think that's going to continue to be the case the rest of the season as it plays out. It certainly will be interesting to see how they utilize him next week versus the Longhorns defense, a much more talented defense than Fresno State brings to town. And yeah, it will be interesting to see if the Wolverines can develop a second threat in the passing game, because Davis Warren only passed for 118 yards tonight and 1 touchdown, and that's problematic as the Longhorns are looming. So anyway, I did want to talk about the Oregon game a little bit, but I didn't watch that game nearly as much. I was locked in on the hate watch with the Wolverines, and so I don't have a ton. Hopefully some other viewers will chime in on that one. I'll jump off for tonight, but appreciate you having me on, man. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And I'll use the Amazon link. So have a good night, Mark. We'll talk to you another time. All right.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you being here.
Yep. Bye-bye now.
Buckeye Battle Cry brings up the Oregon game, and I did not see one play of that, but 24-14 as a 44-point favorite. 24-14. It's kind of difficult to explain that one away. And then I saw Dylan Gabriel's stats, and I thought he lit it up. His stats are glossy. They scored 24 points. Did they fumble at the 5-yard line like 8 times? I don't know what happened there. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. What's going on, man?
I'm doing great. Mark, when a conference expands, they're supposed to get value by their teams winning and dominating on the football field. Well, maybe the Big Ten wants to pick up that advice. That's just some free advice, Mark. I mean, UCLA, terrible today, almost lost to Hawaii. Oregon, ugly duckling alert. Last I saw, Washington was 0-0 against Weber State. Not good day, Mark, for the Big Ten overall. What do you say?
Good day for the Big Ten. Well, the Big Ten basically played, unless I'm missing something, they played one. Now, obviously, as soon as somebody gets upset, then that becomes a big game. If Illinois State would have upset Iowa, that goes from being a complete given to, oh, this is horrible for the Big Ten. So we push those games aside because everybody held serve that was supposed to hold serve. And Penn State went to West Virginia and was by far the better team. So that UCLA won, that Oregon won, because Oregon's had a lot of seasons here recently where they've mounted 9, 10, 11 wins and had these kind of performances. So I'm not necessarily, now I went back the last 2 nights and I posted one of our live streams in which you called. I certainly called it the bad Big Ten because the Big Ten looked awfully bad between Michigan State, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So I get your point, but they have yet to drop anything really substantial. Even Minnesota losing to North Carolina. North Carolina will probably be a much higher seed within their conference than Minnesota.
Well, I'm disappointed now, Mark, because lightning just hit near Lexington. It looks like the Kentucky game is going to go in another weather delay. Yeah, the SEC after dark idea doesn't turn out. I mean, it looks cool playing at night, but outside of that, game hasn't really been competitive at all. Mark,
well,
I want to talk a little.
I like about that, the real, is that if we get done here and somebody's still playing football, then even if it's like 42-6, I'll still probably just say, you know what, I'm going to watch the last 5 minutes of this game.
I agree. I do the same thing.
What is the score there in Lexington?
31-0 Kentucky.
Okay.
There's a few other games on. New Mexico's I think tied against Arizona right now, actually.
Which, considering Kentucky struggles against group of 5 teams, which is pretty standard for them in September, this is actually a step in the right direction that they smack around somebody that they're supposed to smack around.
Correct. Now, I want to talk a little bit more in depth about the Oregon-Idaho game. I watched a little bit of it, a little bit of it, because I saw it was 17-14 late in the fourth quarter. I'm thinking, what on earth is happening here? So I watched the drive where Oregon scored the touchdown to make it 24-14. Oregon got a 4th and 7. Idaho, because they're terrible, Mark, committed like a false start or something, and it was 4th and 2. And then they gave up a wide open touchdown because they're Idaho. So even the score, 24-14, really doesn't encapsulate how close the game was. Idaho could have won this football game, Mark.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would like to go back and see what happened in this game. So I'm glad you cleared that up. If there's anything that I hate, if I don't have any investment in a game, I'm typically going to root for the underdog. And when the underdog blows it in such a way in which the favorite didn't take over the game, but in a situation like you just described, I hate that. When they gift it to the favorite, hate that.
I hate it too. But Mark, another team trying to give it away to the favorite but didn't was Vanderbilt, Mark. I mean, I'm just so proud of Vanderbilt. They actually won against a good opponent, Mark.
Yeah, what we think is a good opponent.
For Vanderbilt, they're a good opponent.
3 or 4 team in the ACC, but the way the ACC looks at this point, but yeah, Virginia Tech.
What is everybody going to say about how the SEC is terrible now, except Florida? Florida's on their own separate plan. But everybody will use the low-hanging fruit of Vanderbilt is terrible. They just beat one of the best teams allegedly in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, you can hang on to that one for the rest of the year, and it may turn out to be extremely valid. Yeah, if Vandy is Vandy, they will be the worst team in the SEC. And there's no way that they're going to be anything better than the 3rd worst team in the SEC. And yeah, Virginia Tech, I don't expect them to just completely implode and be a non-factor in the ACC. They're at least going to be 6-6, 7-5 at worst. And that's a nice little win for the SEC. Not that they need it, but that's another black mark on the ACC.
Right. I like talking about the smaller games because a lot of colleges talk about the big games. So I'm going to leave the Notre Dame and Georgia and stuff to other people. Mark, South Carolina, Old Dominion. I don't know how many plays you watched of that game. Old Dominion could have easily won that football game as well.
Yeah, South Carolina's been doing that under Shane Beamer. And then, of course, the latter days of Will Muschamp playing the likes of App State, Old Dominion. I'm trying to think of who else they have barely slipped by. And actually lost to App State one year, a couple years ago. So, yeah, this has been a South Carolina thing, playing really ugly football against really poor competition. Old Dominion's not even a good group of 5. I think they went 6-7 last year after a string of 3-9 seasons. Yeah, that's bad. That's ugly. And now suddenly Shane Beamer appears to not be on the best ground.
Right. Same way. If anybody didn't see the end of the game, Old Dominion had the ball. They were driving, threw a terrible pass, tipped up in the air. South Carolina easily picks it off. Game over.
Not just today, but in other seasons, I've noticed that I should probably have you have some kind of direct line to me throughout the day, because you do a nice job. You've got a knack of finding the key moments all across the country.
Well, Mark, I'm not sure about you, but I just flip through like every game. If there's one on commercial, I just flip to the next one, I just go, and I'll have like 2 or 3 screens on, just constantly looking. So that's how I'm able to keep up with the key plays. But I can help you out if you want me to. What other game was interesting? I didn't see any of this because I didn't have ESPN Plus, but Texas Tech versus Abilene Christian, 52-51, Mark. Texas Tech wins in overtime. What in the world happened there? How embarrassing is that for Texas Tech?
Yeah, that's the bottom of the Big 12 doing what the bottom of the Big 12 does. I know that Houston almost lost to somebody called Houston Baptist the year before last, or it might have been last year. They beat them in overtime. Texas Tech lost to Wyoming last year. Baylor has a string of these kind of games as well. So that's the Big 12 for you. Texas Tech, that looks bad for them, but they could turn around in 2 or 3 weeks and beat one of the best teams in the Big 12.
Right, but not a good look for the Big 12 at all to be going to overtime against a terrible, I'm guessing FCS. I don't even know what conference or league they're in. They're that bad, Abilene Christian. Final game, Mark, I'll mention, though, to you is Florida, because Florida is obviously the number one story of the day. Do they win 2 games this year?
Not if they play like they did today. They'll beat Samford, and I guess they could have a rock fight kind of win against Mississippi State, and that would be it. But if they don't play better than they did, and that was at home, they hung into this in this game, as I mentioned off the top of the show, on the scoreboard. But from the very first play, they were the inferior team, and they just found a way to kind of hang around a little bit. And then they just got annihilated. Their offense was atrocious, terrible, couldn't do anything.
Mark, maybe you can explain this to me, okay? You have the transfer portal era in which you can get anybody you want realistically. And you see what Graham Mertz has been and what he's been at your program for a year. Why on earth would you continue going with Graham Mertz as your quarterback?
Well, Graham Mertz had a nice season last year. He was a really good player.
I guess, but he wasn't special or anything. He was just average to below average. I don't think he's done anything fantastic.
Hang on. He was not average or below average last year. I think he set an SEC completion percentage record and had a 20-3 TD to pick ratio. He had a nice season last year. He was not their problem last year. They were ecstatic to have him come back. But he was bad today. Now, he didn't have the protection that Cam Ward had. He doesn't have the offensive line. But, yeah, Graham Mertz was bad today.
Right. And then when the game's a complete blowout, they threw in their true freshman quarterback to just completely destroy his confidence and have him rot against a decent opponent.
Some people think that he's the only hope that Billy Napier sticks around, that for some reason he would have some kind of attachment to Billy Napier. I don't really understand that, but I've heard that here and there. I can't think of a time that a coach after the first week of the season looked to be this obvious that he was going to be fired.
Honestly, Mark, I don't think ever a coach has been fired after week 1 of a season. But if it's time to cut the cord, I believe the cord should be cut immediately. There's almost nothing Florida can do at this point to save their season. They're a horrendous football team, Mark. They legitimately might be the worst team in the SEC.
Yeah, and this is starting. I've tried to defend Billy Napier to a certain extent, but when you're in year 3 and you're at a big school that has resources, that has money, that has a transfer portal that obviously allows you to build a team rather quickly compared to what it was 5 years ago. And on top of that, he inherited a bad Florida roster by Florida standards, but not a roster that was just completely depleted of talent. So he's done nothing with it, and they have only gotten worse.
Right, and there's just no hope going for. I mean, there's no hope, Mark, other than this one player. That's how bad things are. I don't think I've ever seen a program that is as good as Florida be this low, ever. Like, it's honestly kind of sad, Mark, because Florida used to be a game Georgia, Auburn, everybody got up to play Tennessee, and now it's just that check mark win on the schedule, like Vanderbilt is, or Mississippi State, or Arkansas has been.
Yeah, they're starting to fall into the abyss like Oklahoma did in the 90s or Texas did in the last 10 or 12 years. It's getting to be that bad. Now Dan Mullen doesn't seem to be such a bad coach.
Yeah, sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Final thing I'll ask you, Mark, is it okay if I give my national championship odds after today's games?
Absolutely.
I've got 77% to the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm not sure if you've seen them today. They look elite. I've got 13% to Ohio State, 8% to Texas, and 2% to Oregon.
Okay. Oregon gets 2% after your analysis of them today.
I'm not going to let go of them just because of one game. I did that last year, and it may have cost me, Mark. I'm still waiting for the NCAA investigation to wrap up because, so it's still asterisks until then, in my opinion.
The fine folks in Indianapolis may bail you out.
Anyway, Mark, good talking to you.
Thanks for being here, Darrell. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. And we've got our guy Adam on the line. Adam, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine. What's going on?
Yeah, very interesting day of college football. So after watching these games, I'm going to make my prediction for who's going to win the national championship. And it's going to be Notre Dame. Notre Dame has the defense, and they have the skilled players, and they have the offensive line. And they went into Kyle Field despite 105,000 fans and all those theatrics, and they absolutely shut down A&M. A&M had 100 passing yards, 4 of 13 on third down, 2 interceptions, and 3.6 yards per play. Notre Dame is for real, and I think the ghost of Ara Parsegian, Dan Devine, and Lou Holtz is going to lead them to a natty this year. And I know everyone's going to disagree with me, but this team is for real. What are your thoughts?
Well, my initial thought is that you're wrong, but I will come to your defense on these points. Notre Dame just cleared one of their biggest hurdles on the schedule and the most difficult road environment that they're going to see this season. So they did clear the first of 4, if you want to count Louisville. And because of their fairly light schedule, the one thing that's going to allow for them, most likely, there's always a random factor to injuries, but they might actually arrive at the college football playoff with the freshest team. They will not have played a conference championship game, of course. And you got to think that just about everyone, probably 9 of the 12 teams that will be in the CFP will have played a conference championship game. And so there's that slight advantage. I do think that the defenses don't go into slumps. I do believe the old adage, they don't have off weeks. There are bad matchups and good matchups. I do believe in that. So they could run into somebody that could just have their number in terms of a matchup issue. But when you're that solid on defense, and I think one thing that might be missing from tonight's game takeaway by a lot of people would be that their offensive line wasn't ripping through Texas A&M with these gaping holes, but these guys only have 6 career starts, and they grew up. And when the game was on the line and it was a tie game in the fourth quarter in a hostile environment, this offensive line kind of grew up. They got a veteran quarterback in Riley Leonard. He's a dual threat guy. I think he got something there. I just think that watching Georgia today, not that it surprised me, but wow. Clemson played them pretty well for a half, at least on one side of the ball. But once Georgia kicked it into gear, Clemson's not a bad team. I know a lot of people are going to say that they're bad, and by Clemson standards, they are bad, but they're not a bad team. They might actually turn out to be a top 15 team in the country. They just ran into a buzzsaw. That Georgia team's on another level. I might be saying that about Ohio State in about 6 weeks, maybe. I don't know. I got to see them tested against. If Ohio State played Clemson today and they beat them 34-3, then I'd be saying the same thing about the Buckeyes. Now the Buckeyes have the right personnel. They have the proven talent and production to be just good as Georgia, but we haven't seen it with this collection of players. So I'll reserve my opinion. Of course, I had my preseason opinion, but now that we're kicking into the season, I'll separate what I thought in the preseason versus what we're seeing unravel or be unveiled before our eyes. So those two teams, it's difficult for me to see Notre Dame beating either one of them on a neutral site.
Well, I think you make, I know my opinion's unpopular, but what I would say is this. A lot of people thought that Oregon was going to either be in the national championship or win the national championship this year. Well, look at what happened with Idaho. A lot of people thought Michigan could contend for the national championship. Look what happened with Fresno State. Everyone thinks Ohio State is likely to be in the national championship. Well, it was 10-3 midway through the second quarter. Everyone talks a lot about Georgia. Georgia had 6 points at the end of the first half. So a lot of people who think, that's a crazy prediction. Well, look at the teams that you've predicted and look how they've performed in their first game. And the same goes for Alabama, because I don't think Jalen Milroe will take Alabama to a national championship. So I would say that my prediction about Notre Dame has to be taken relative to how the other teams have performed. So for those who have predicted other teams to win the national championship, well, look at how Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, and Georgia in the first half performed today. So that's a respectful disagreement. But as always, I enjoy talking to you, and I thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling, Adam. Appreciate it.
You got it.
I will say this about Notre Dame. I listed them as the 7th best team in college football in the preseason in my top 25 that actually makes sense, which will, of course, the first edition in season will come out on Tuesday after the Florida State-Boston College game wraps up the weekend. But the top 25 that actually makes sense, I had Notre Dame at number 7, meaning I believe or believed going into the season, and nothing that transpired tonight has changed my mind, that Notre Dame is the 7th best team in college football. Really, nothing's happened among the top 15 or 20 teams yet to change my mind about anyone, really. Notre Dame passed the test, though, and Georgia really just added to my respect and admiration for how good they are. That's all they did. They just basically went from, in my opinion, being the best team in the country to there being a huge confirmation that they're the best team in the country. They don't have a weakness. Like, if we were going to analyze their weakness, we'd have to bring in coaches and they would scouts and they would have to analyze the tape for like days to figure out, okay, their right guard gets beat on these type plays against that type of player. Those are their weaknesses. They are mild. Now, they didn't necessarily face a team today that could stretch them defensively or do anything. Clemson is void of playmakers. They've got a really good back in Phil Maffa. They have what is among contenders a mediocre offensive line. If you ranked it across the country, it would be good, but it's not good enough. And Cade Klubnik, God bless him. I didn't get to see him really get comfortable in that game. And I would have liked to have, if you could take Cade Klubnik and have him play behind the Georgia offensive line and Carson Beck behind the Clemson offensive line, I think we would still consider Carson Beck to be a substantially better quarterback than Cade Klubnik. But these quarterbacks get hurt in the perception by people watching, obviously connected to the offensive line play. And Cade Klubnik, much of the time, had no shot. Although it was pretty obvious to me that either because of a lack of confidence in Klubnik and or a lack of confidence in the offensive line being able to pass pro, they just don't drop him back very often. He doesn't take a normal NFL 5 or 7 step drop and read a defense. Everything's kind of gimmicky, roll him out, have some type of motion, the RPO, the read out. They work all that into it, where Carson Beck, a lot of those downfield passes are just flat out, boom, dropping back and delivering the ball downfield. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Andrew on the line. Andrew, what's going on?
Happy week 1, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
Good. I think that was a really garbage take that Adam had, not to talk too much crap, but the fact that I'll agree with him that Oregon didn't look good, but to say that Notre Dame is now all of a sudden his favorite to win the national championship, and pointing out specifically Georgia only had 6 points going into halftime. How many points did Notre Dame have going into halftime? I think it was 6, and they allowed 2 scoring drives by Texas A&M. So that was a terrible reason to give number one. Number two, I don't know if he mentioned Texas or Ole Miss or Alabama, but they're scoring in the 50s, 60s, and 70s against their opponents and blanking them on the other side of the ball as well. So I would really hold off on crowning Notre Dame before they win a postseason game, which I don't know the last time that happened.
That would be January 1st, 1994, that they won a major bowl game.
Okay. Thank you for putting that on the record. I needed a reminder. That 30 years, right?
That's it.
Yeah. I didn't even know what a football was in 1994.
I wish I could say that.
So Jareel did a really good job covering some of the stuff that happened today. One game he didn't really mention, and to be honest, I didn't pay attention to anything other than the final score. Do you know what the predictions or what the line was on that Houston and UNLV game? Because Houston got smoked. And I don't know if they were supposed to. I don't even know if they were supposed to win because they lost so badly. Were they even a favorite to beat them?
UNLV was one of the best teams in the Mountain West last year. Of course, Barry Odom's there now, and Houston might be the worst. They might be, especially now that we've seen Vandy, might be the worst team in the Power Five. I'm guessing. I know the game was at Houston. I'm going to guess Houston was a 4 or 5 point favorite. Would be my guess. I'm going to look it up right now.
It was a surprise to see, only because Houston is still in a power conference. I don't know much about UNLV, but I was definitely surprised to see such a lopsided result in a game like that. I would have, even if Houston is a bad team, you would expect a power conference team to put up more of a fight against a lesser an opponent from a lesser conference.
I was off by about 1 point. Houston was a 3.5 point favorite.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks for that. I think my biggest takeaways, first of all, I want to talk about Georgia. That's my team. I love Georgia. Go Dogs. I was happy to see the performance that they put on today in the second half, but I feel like Georgia has had now carried over an issue from last season, which is kind of slow starts in the first half, which I'd really like to get away from, because we've got games on our schedule against teams that came out blazing in the first half today, and we can't afford to try to come from behind on the road against Alabama, Texas, or Ole Miss. So I think that it's not on the players, the fact that we were a little bit anemic on offense in the first half. I put that more on coaching, especially for the first couple of drives and the script that they had ready. We did not look good. A couple of our biggest gains in the first quarter were Carson Beck scrambles, which, if those are some of your biggest plays in the first half of the game, you're doing something wrong. So Georgia really has, if Georgia has an issue, I would say that was the biggest one that I have today. Everything else looked really good. And I thought it was a really good win for Georgia, and I'm really excited to see what they do for the rest of the year. But do you think that that's something to keep an eye on? We do have a couple of games to play before we go on the road and play some of these big games. I think we play Kentucky in week 3, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd like to see, I believe that's on the road as well, if I'm not mistaken. But I'd like to see how they play in that game. Do you think Georgia needs to be concerned about their first half performance today?
Well, I think your point might be valid. I'm not dismissing it, but I also think it's extremely difficult to evaluate and compare two teams that are playing such different competition. They're playing like talent, even though Clemson's nowhere close to them, and that was obvious today. They're still a top 10 to 12 talent team in the country. Actually, they're like fifth in the total team talent rankings, where Ole Miss is playing Furman. I think Alabama, if Western Kentucky's as good as they typically are, which they've been 8-5, 9-5 in that range the last 3 or 4 years, that the Alabama game was extremely impressive. For them to shut out Western Kentucky, who can always throw the ball well, that was a really impressive showing. Ole Miss being a 42-point favorite, I actually, as soon as I saw that line, knew that they were just going to completely annihilate that spread against Furman. So that's the only thing I would say about that. And I also think that Kirby Smart had to know, looking at the preparation for Clemson and looking at the film, that Clemson was not going to threaten his defense. And that's why I think they were a bit conservative in the first half. Also, what happened was they got a little bit more creative those first two drives of the second half. For them to come out, I think it's a good point on your side in terms of being optimistic for what Georgia can do. When they come out with a 6-0 lead at halftime, probably got a butt kicking in the locker room, and come out and just were laser focused those first two drives, and just like 6 plays, 75 yards, touchdown, 7 plays, 75 yards, touchdown to put the game away. And they also put the freshman on the field, Nate Frazier, and he's just another level player. So you got to be excited about him too.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely excited about him coming back, and the fact that Branson Robinson got the start today, obviously had to do a lot with ETN being suspended, and I guess them not being totally confident in what Nate Frazier could do. But I think going forward, the starting lineup will change a little bit at the running back position for sure. I don't think the suspension is going to last longer than a game for ETN. So I'm excited to see how he plays. I was really psyched about some of the things that I saw from the freshman though as well. And then happy to see that Malachi Starks is still in All-American form as well. That interception was as good as anything I've seen him do before, and he's got a pretty long highlight reel, but that will definitely be up there for him.
I did not appreciate that play until I saw the slow motion replay, and just between the tracking of the ball, which is not easy for a defensive back. There are top defensive backs who get drafted in the first round of the NFL who have the flexibility, the hip movement, the speed, the agility, the length, all that stuff, but they can't track a football like a wide receiver downfield because that's why they're playing cornerback. But for him to just freaking track the ball in the lights, that long of a throw along the sideline, then to, high point the football, contort his body, twist all the way around, that type of elevation, all of it put together, that was just a thing of beauty.
The local station here in Atlanta played the interception from tonight's Clemson game against an interception he had against Bo Nix in the Oregon opener 2 seasons ago, and they look exactly the same. It just
which I think was, I'm sorry to interrupt, which I believe was on the other sideline.
Correct. I was literally just about to say that. So they were mirror image of each other. So yeah, the only other couple things I want to say is I'm not gonna take away as much negativity from the Michigan game as I think a lot of people will. Michigan was a 21-point favorite. They won by 20. And I guess you could say that it was closer for longer than I think most people expected. And maybe a 21-point spread was factoring in some garbage time points from Fresno State, but they were still right near where the betting line was set prior to the game. So I don't know how you can really be too upset with a result that is so close to what Vegas was willing to, set the money line at.
Well, as well as anybody, I believe, based on the amount of football that you watch, that to arrive at a final score versus watching the game and determining how well the game was played are two different things much of the time.
It is. I hope that Michigan's offensive line play gets better for their sake. Obviously, as a Georgia fan, I hope it stays the same. But that's something that I was a little bit surprised to see, because you've got, I don't know how many new starters they have on the offensive line. I guess it would be a lot, because haven't they won the Joe Moore Award for the last 2 seasons before this?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that they lost a lot of veterans. I don't follow Michigan enough to know, but I would think that they would have enough people that have grown up watching that, the superb line play of the past 2 seasons, be able to take away more from that training than they were able to show today against Fresno. But I'm still reserving, I guess, my opinion on how good of a team Michigan is. Oregon, on the other hand, I will say should be concerned for sure. I agree with you completely that looking at Dylan Gabriel's stat line and then looking at the final score doesn't add up. He had 380 yards on like, he was like 25 of 35 passing or something.
He was 41 of 49.
41. Okay, my bad.
He threw 49 passes.
Right. So you throw 83% completion, and you throw for almost 400 yards, and I don't think he had any interceptions. And the team only scores 24 points. That's just weird. But I will say, it reminds me of the Mark Richt days at Georgia, where we would start a season ranked in the top 10 and come out looking really terrible against a overmatched opponent. And in those seasons, when we opened the seasons with games like that, we would inevitably finish ranked somewhere in the 15 to 25 range. So I am willing to say that I would put money on it that if Oregon does make the playoffs, they're going to lose in the first round, or they might not even make the playoffs, because that kind of performance, if they can rebound from it, still says to me that they can't reach anything higher than, maybe a ranking between 11 and 15 at the end of the year. Because teams that are truly top 10 at the end of the year would not have a performance on their resume that includes 14 to 24 at home against Idaho. And I'm sorry to say that for the Oregon fan. And I'm sorry to say it, because of the respect that I have for Dan Lanning and what he did for Georgia. But that's just the way that I see it.
All right, man. I appreciate the call. Call back anytime.
Thanks.
All right, let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got about 4 or 5 callers on the line. I wanted to look at this real quick because Oregon scores 24 points and Dylan Gabriel goes 41 of 49 for 380 yards. That just doesn't make sense, other than possibly fumbling inside the 5-yard line a bunch of times, or missing a bunch of field goals, or the other team going on 8-minute drives and then they don't score. So Oregon gets the football first and they score a touchdown, 11 plays, 71 yards, and they take over 5 minutes. And then the next time they went 3 and out and punted. Then they went 9 plays, 41 yards, and kicked a field goal, missed a field goal. So there's 3 points that they should have had. Then they went 8 plays, 80 yards in 3:24. So that's a pretty short drive in terms of time for a touchdown. Okay, here's one right here. You go 9 plays, 62 yards, and you fumble. Okay. And then you also go 4 plays, 32 yards. And it looks like they tried to score at the end of the half, but did not score. So it was 14-0 at the end of the half. They had a long drive and a fumble. They had a long drive, missed field goal, and they had a drive, and then they ran into halftime. Then they go 3 plays and punt, 3 and out. Then they went only 5 plays and 24 yards, but they went for it and did not get it on downs. So there you go. This is how you go with that many yards passing and 41-49 and only score 24 points, because 2 consecutive drives, they go out on downs. So they went for it on 4th down, 2 consecutive drives, and didn't get it. Then they went 14 plays, 67 yards on a 6.5-minute drive and kicked a field goal. They went 10 plays, 75 yards, and scored a touchdown in 4 minutes. And that's what got them the 24-14 lead. And then they went 3 plays and punted. And then they ran out the clock, the final 3 plays of the game. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Michigan Man on the line.
What's up, Mark? I got a lot to talk about with my team, man. I disagree with the last caller, man. I got a lot of concerns. 1, 2. I'm in wait-and-see mode. The reason I'm in wait-and-see mode is this is a whole new coaching staff. They don't have the reputation, in my opinion, for me to just give them grace, right? All new players. The whole offensive line is new. Let's start with the defense. I thought was elite. It reminded me a lot of last year. I had some issues with it. I think the new defensive coordinator blitzes a little too much, but that offense, man, that was some Iowa-esque offense.
Well, don't
Would
say
you
that.
agree?
Iowa scored 40 points today.
I mean, the Iowa from the last 2 years.
I
type
know.
offense.
I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, I got you. It's a lot of concerns, man. Like the offensive line was getting no push. I get they're new, gotta let them grow, maybe. I'm not impressed with the wide receivers. I don't know, and you're never really impressed with Michigan wide receivers, but the rotations were weird. We played a walk-on wide receiver. I don't know what's going on with that. And I think the quarterback situation, he didn't play necessarily bad, but I don't know. How do you feel about that? I got a lot of questions.
Well, I didn't see too much of the game. I will say this, that in the 3 Big Ten championship seasons, what did all those Michigan teams do against inferior opponents? Not just out of conference, not against just those lousy non-conference teams, because you would have to say that Fresno State is probably the best of the non-conference G5 teams that they've played these 3 seasons. But Michigan was doing this against everybody in the Big Ten, not named Ohio State, Michigan, and then maybe one other game. You know, all the Minnesotas, all the Michigan States, all the Indianas on down the line. Michigan has been obliterating them for 3 years. So these scores have been 52-7, 45-3,
with the exception of Bowling Green last year.
Except for Bowling Green when JJ threw 3 picks. And yeah, they let them hang around into the second half. Correct. Final, I think they beat them 31-6, but yeah, it was like 14-6 at half or something like that.
But I've heard people try to say that, and I don't like that because, one, those players were proven. They've shown what they can do. None of these players are proven. So they could just be what they showed today. You know? That could be what they are. I don't know. And we got to wait and see. But you know what we were right about, Mark? And we talked about this? Edwards, he can't be your every down back.
Yeah.
Period. He proved it again today. And I think Mullings needs to be the RB1. I think he is going to be RB1 after today. He ended up getting most of the carries. He looks really good. You just can't have Edwards is a complimentary back. He doesn't get you tough yards. If the hole's not big enough, he gets stopped for a 1 or 2 yard gain. He dances too much. He doesn't hit the hole hard enough. It's just, I think us Michigan fans have to come to that realization. I mean, I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, it's just hard to explain this many times going up against these kind of teams and not being able to dominate them. He was at 3.5 yards per carry until late in the season last year. So I don't know what the deal is with him. But yeah, we had that conversation here recently that if you took his ceiling, if you took his best 5 games in college, he looks like a first-team All-American, but he is not that guy every down.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, exactly. I mean, it is what it is. I think we got, and if you really watch this tape, all the runs that he hits that he's had hit in those games, the holes are huge.
Yeah.
They're huge. You could drive a Mack truck through them.
True.
He's not getting tough yards. And then yeah, my national championship pick right now today, because I think out of all the top 10 teams, I think there was only one elite performance, and that was Georgia.
Yep.
I don't think anyone had an elite performance. I don't think Ohio State. Well, I think their defensively they looked as advertised for the most part. But Akron is one of the worst MAC schools there is. I mean, they're would they win like 5 games the last 3 years or something crazy like that?
Yeah.
So I think they look good. I think Will Howard, believe it or not, could be a slight upgrade. I know it's Akron. We got to wait and see. And when you play a lot of these bad teams, you don't pay attention to, if they blew them out. You look for the things that they don't do well, because if they don't do something well against a bad team, that's more of a red flag. And I think Ohio State has a running game issue again this year. What do you think?
Well, based on today, yeah, they should, like, even if they're having issues, let's say their offensive line is having issues in practice with the talent that they have, and these backs are not difficult to block for. You're talking about 2 All-American type level backs. They should be able to maul Akron, and even if they mauled them today and ran for 350 yards, I would still have questions, because that wouldn't have proven anything. But they weren't able to do that. So, yeah, until further notice, that's in question. They play Iowa in about 4 weeks, and we'll see if they can run against them.
I'll tell you what, though, that Jeremiah Smith, he's a freak.
Yeah,
that dude is a freak. I think he's going to end up being better than Marvin Harrison personally, but he's similar in the sense that, he wasn't getting a lot of separation today, but what he does do is he finds a way to catch the ball even when draped. Like, he could be that one catch he had, that one-handed catch he had towards the end zone. That was ridiculous.
Yeah,
that was absurd.
He showed up as advertised, and if you're going to be a starting wide receiver at Ohio State as a true freshman, then Marvin Harrison wasn't able to do that. Olave wasn't able to do that. Garrett Wilson wasn't able to do that. So,
wasn't the last one Ted Ginn? I think isn't that the last? I think that's the last true freshman.
Yeah,
wide receiver.
Do a lot of different things. He was, not that he didn't play receiver, but they used him on end arounds and had him do a lot of that. And obviously, they didn't throw the ball as much. But yeah, played in 2003.
How would you grade Will Howard performance? I thought he looked good for the most part, personally.
I didn't see hardly any of the game.
I thought he looked good. I don't think he's going to be quite. He threw some good balls. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's going to be quite as good of a thrower as Kyle McCord, but he has a much better confidence back there. I don't know if it's experience or whatever, and he can use his legs. He clearly has. Kyle McCord kind of shelled up in the pocket. He looks like he's not scared in the pocket, which is huge.
Oh, well, yeah, that I anticipated. Will Howard's played in big games, and he's played well in big games. And say what you will about his less than sterling first-round type NFL talent, he may not be that guy. But, yeah, he's played in big games, and he's played well in big games. So I would not expect certainly the Akron game to wow him at all, although it's a different team, and the expectations are through the roof. So he could be feeling that type of pressure. But I don't think that's going to be what the issue is with Will Howard, if there is one, that the stage is too big for him. I just think that maybe he's limited.
Yeah, I need to see how he handles pressure. I'll tell you what. What week does Ohio State play Penn State?
That's in mid to late October.
So to me, after today, I would put those 2 teams as the best teams in the Big Ten. after what we've seen today. I know it's only week 1, but I think that game is going to tell a lot. And I thought Penn State looked great today, personally.
Yeah, I thought they
for West
really
Virginia.
did too. Yeah, after they got through some nervousness, their first couple drives, a few bad snaps, and Aller missed his first couple throws. Then after that, they got rolling, and the offensive line was dominant. And Aller was on target. The two backs got rolling, or especially Nick Singleton. They actually showed some explosiveness in the passing game. I counted 16 10-yard or plus plays and 5 over 20 yards. Yeah, they weren't doing that even against average teams last year.
Yeah, no, I get. And you're gonna hate this, but Penn State's my new pick for the Big Ten champ.
Okay.
Just after week 1, that's my new pick. Georgia's my national championship pick, and that's it. And before I go, real quick, that Notre Dame take was insane. That was the most insane take I've ever heard. One, they don't have the reputation at all to be basing that off of 1 week 1 performance where you beat Texas A&M by what, 10?
Yes. Well, and it was tied with 2 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, that's a wild take. So I got a peace out, man.
All right. Despite Michigan Man's prediction there, I will be able to sleep tonight. I don't think I'm going to have much issue sleeping tonight. I think I'll be able to make it through. Yeah, Penn State looked good. They looked good, and they played West Virginia. We got Jeffrey on the line. Jeffrey, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. Interesting day of college football is all I can say. To really kick off the season with the full slate of games. I'm obviously every single time I come on for these type of shows, I don't know like what games you watched, because I always say like, did you watch Indiana? You probably didn't watch Indiana, but
no, I see that they won 31-7. That's all I know.
I had a feeling, but I mean, what's your takeaway from that? Like, I mean, because I know last year you remember the Akron game.
Sure.
And Indiana barely beat Akron. That was just a terrible game. And it was just comfortable, a comfortable win. That's improvement, right?
That's what my take is. That is exactly what my take is that if you look at the Tom Allen era, aside from his 2 big seasons, they struggled against a lot of teams like this. FIU, Akron, who's better? Actually, this FIU team is probably better than that Akron U team was last year. And so they handled business. 31-7 tells me that it's not like they scored at will, but yeah, it sounds like a comfortable win. What was the score at halftime?
21-7.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it was just a comfortable game. I mean, they didn't do anything super impressive. Probably the stat that impressed me the most was the fact that Indiana rushed for 240 yards in the game, which I know isn't insane or anything, but Indiana, it took them like 3 or 4 games last year to get that. And I know it's FIU, but like you said, Indiana beating FIU by 24 is a whole lot more impressive than squeaking by Akron, especially when Florida International is a better team than Akron, most likely. Yeah, I mean, they are. I would say that they are. I mean, see the rushing stat, 234 rushing yards. That's solid.
Jeffrey, do you want to be the host of our new Indiana channel? I'm somewhat joking, but I'm really not. You could be, but absolutely. What's going on here? AT&T is getting after me. What in the world is that?
I have no idea. That came out of nowhere.
Jeez. Sure. Yeah.
I've never seen that before when looking at a schedule. I don't know. Maybe you accidentally clicked on an ad. I don't know.
Oh, how
it's
annoying.
Crazy. But I will say, though, I know you don't have an Indiana channel. I know that because Indiana doesn't get a lot of interest. But yeah, that would be interesting if you ever created one. That would be something that maybe we could discuss. That'd be cool. I don't know. That would be because I mean I'm probably like one of the only people. I'm not bragging. I'm not bragging at all. I don't like bragging, but I've had a lot of people tell me that I could probably be one of the only ones that could get them hyped for Indiana football because it's not easy to do.
You would be the one. Yeah.
But I appreciate that, Mark. But yeah, I was really happy with the game, though, because it was just I didn't have to sweat watching Indiana play a game. It was just nice to see. But I will say, though, besides Indiana, obviously, you know that I'm an Alabama fan, too. And I did watch Alabama just bludgeon Western Kentucky. Were you shocked that Alabama just beat them the way they did? Or, like, were you expecting, like, maybe Western Kentucky would put up a couple touchdowns?
I was not shocked, but I was overly impressed. I was extremely impressed. That spread was only 31.5. And when I say only 31.5, that shows at least Vegas considers Western Kentucky capable, because it's not the 50 that you see when Arkansas was playing Arkansas Pine Bluff and Ohio State Akron and those kind of games. You know, then you see 50. Oregon was a 44-point favorite. I picked Alabama to obliterate that point spread, but Western Kentucky, I'm not familiar with what they've got this year, but they've been 8-5, 8-5, 9-5 the last 3 years and contended for their conference championship. Of course, post Bailey Zappi even have had really strong passing attacks. So they are competitive now. As a measurement, they lost to Ohio State last year 63-10. What was the final with Alabama?
63-0.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there was just nothing from Western Kentucky. They didn't do anything.
Now I say 63-10. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. But I was, I think that they're usually a decent group of 5 program. So yeah, just to obliterate and truck them from the start, it was like 28 zip, like nothing. It's really impressive for me not seeing one play of the game.
Yeah, I watched both those games a lot, obviously. And I mean, Alabama, it just really impressed me. I was not expecting that. I thought that they would have a little bit of rust, like first game with the Boer. I thought there'd just be a little bit of rust. They look fantastic, and I was very impressed. I will say that I have to ask this question. It's going to be probably between a couple teams. I'm not going to be really shocked with whoever you pick, but which team disappointed you the most today?
Well, before I answer that question, our old buddy TJ Finley, the former Auburn quarterback, was quarterbacking there at Western Kentucky, I see.
Yeah, TJ Finley, he did better at Texas State.
Yeah, Texas State. Yep. Yeah, it's always funny now with the transfer portal to see where guys show up. Like the starting quarterback at Akron today was Ryan Finley, was quarterbacking there at Akron. But anyway, so most disappointing team today. Well, Clemson was the most disappointing team today that had something to play for that you would think should have been better. Florida was extremely disappointing, but they're a dead program. And I hate to say it that way because I usually don't talk like that, but I've never seen a team or a program enter a season that had as little hope as Florida because of the schedule, because of the last 2 seasons, because of the coach, because of all that's involved. And they only amplified that 100 times today by not just losing, but not losing 27-24, getting completely outclassed. So, wow. So Florida overall was the most disappointing team, but the most disappointing team that I think still has hope and could do something would be Clemson. Clemson, I thought defensively they played a good first half. They were physically staying with Georgia. Georgia was moving the ball a little bit, but obviously just had the 2 field goals. And I thought it was a good fight. You know, it looked like one of those games where the dam was going to break eventually. So I always had that feeling. Number one, because of the way the game flow was going. Number two, just my knowledge of the 2 teams. That the discouraging thing about Clemson is you just don't see anything on offense that excites you about somebody making plays. They've got a mediocre quarterback. They've got a mediocre offensive line. They've got one good running back. I'm sure the backups are fine, but they've got one, and he's not a superstar, but Philmoff is a good back. And they've got dudes that would be the number 3 receiver at Georgia or Ohio State. Like, they've got a couple of those guys. Like, Bo Collins is a decent wide receiver, but he'd be like the 4th receiver at the schools I just mentioned. So I knew going into that game, and it played out perfectly from that standpoint. I was just thinking, how are they going to score? I don't see them scoring, and they basically didn't.
I agree.
Most disappointing from a team that's nationally relevant. And a lot of people would argue with me on that and say, well, they're not relevant anymore. But in the ACC, everybody's relevant.
They can still make the playoff. That's what you're saying. Like, they can make the playoff. They're still a factor. Florida's not a factor. I agree. And I knew you were going to respond with both those teams because they were the 2 biggest disappointing teams for me as well. What were you going to say?
How funny would this be, Jeffrey, if Georgia gets upset along the way or in the SEC championship game and they drop to like a 6 seed and Clemson wins the ACC and they're a 3 or 4 seed?
It's just going to be broken. It absolutely is. It's not going to make any sense at all. And that shouldn't happen. That's the way the playoff system is set up, which doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, I expected Clemson to get beat the way they did. My final score prediction was 31-10, and it was 34-3. So that didn't surprise me. It was disappointing, but I had a feeling. I wouldn't say I knew because you could say you knew, and the game could be different. But I had a feeling most likely they would lose like that. Yep. The one that frustrated me was Florida because I picked Florida. I picked Florida to win the game. And I'm just like, what in the world? Like you said, I never say that either, but they are a dead program right now. You are right. Absolutely. Because there's nothing there. I mean, they literally are just a program that has a couple decent players, a good fan base, but you can't win right now. You cannot win at Florida. That's why, like, the other night, and I was going to bring this up on the 24-hour show because I came on right after you were talking about Florida and everything and some of the coaches that could go there and all that. And my thing is why would Lane Kiffin want to go to Florida? Why would Chris Kleiman want to go to Florida? I can understand Jed Fish because that's just the way he is. It seems hopping team to team. But Lane Kiffin, he'd be insane to go to Florida. It would have made more sense for him to go to Auburn than Florida. I mean, I understand money and the prestige of the job. I get that Florida's over Ole Miss in that regard, but Ole Miss, he's got them right now as a top 10 to 15 program. Florida can't make a bowl game. I wouldn't go to Florida. Absolutely would not go to Florida.
Well, you make a great point because I think we've got this hierarchy in our heads, and it makes sense, but at the same time, things do change. And schools do elevate and they decline. People today wouldn't believe that LSU from the late 80s up until the time Nick Saban showed up in 2000 were an under 500 program in the SEC. They were current day Arkansas, Mississippi State. And so things can change. So when we have it in our head because Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer were at Florida, maybe it was just Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. Maybe it wasn't Florida. They haven't won just without question, regardless of what happens. And so if I'm Lane Kiffin, I would have to be given a serious sales pitch to understand, okay, and who knows how well acquainted Lane Kiffin is with Billy Napier. He may think he's a clown. He may think he's a really good coach, but he would make an assessment to say, maybe I think Billy Napier's a decent coach. So why is he not winning at Florida? Is there something wrong there? So yeah, if you're in a good situation being Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, even though you're at a place that's not supposed to win and is supposedly maybe he's changing that. He is changing that, and maybe he can sustain that, and maybe he'll be at Ole Miss for 10 years and win the SEC a few times and go to the playoffs about half the time and completely change what that's supposed to be at Ole Miss. So, yeah, I wouldn't be willing just to jump at a name job just because it's a name job. If it's a dysfunctional administration and they don't have the facilities, because these kids you're recruiting, unless you're currently elite, they don't care what was going on in 2008.
I mean, it's like Indiana basketball. Everybody's like, oh, Indiana, they're elite. They have 5 championships. They haven't done anything since 2002. They went to the Final Four in 2002. So it's been 22 years. Nobody that is alive playing on college football and college basketball teams was even born, or they were like a baby when that happened. No one cares. It's old news. You have to keep being good. You have to continue to be relevant. I mean, like if Clemson just falls off a cliff and then like Dabo's tenure ends one day and then they have a new couple coaches and they're horrible, nobody's even going to think about Clemson anymore. Like they'll be like, oh yeah, they were good then, but now they're horrible and no one's going to care. So I agree with you 100%. It is what it is with Florida. I mean, they're a great program compared to most, but they're not elite. They're just not. And I don't know. It's going to take a special coach to get him back there. It's possible, but it's going to be very hard. And I would just stay away from the job if I was Lane Kiffin and some of the other names you said. I know you probably have a lot of callers. A couple more things that I wanted to say really quick. Michigan, I know that there's a lot of Michigan fans that watch the Voice of College Football, and I love tons of them. They're great people. But the thing is that some of them that are like really surprised that their offense was bad today, I've been saying it for months. Like their offense was not going to be that good at first. Alex Orji is flawed, very flawed. And it's kind of like North Carolina now that Max Johnson's out for the season. Connor Harrell, the backup, maybe he gets better because right now he's not good. He can run, but his passing ability, outside of one pass that he had in the Minnesota game where the receiver was so open, anybody could make the throw, that he didn't do anything in the passing game. So Alex Orji, Connor Harrell, there's just a lot of quarterbacks that are not good passers that are very talented. They like Milroe at first. Milroe couldn't pass the ball at all. He's gotten better. Maybe Orji does. But they're like shocked. Our offense is bad. I wasn't expecting. I did. Maybe not that bad. But I was expecting it to not be that good either, because we know that Alex Orji, based off what he has shown in every bit of film that he has, he's not a great passer right now. So why is that a surprise? I don't understand. It's not surprising.
Well stated. And they've got this Donovan Edwards situation at running back where he's supposed to be a superstar, and he's had brilliant games in his career, but he's never been a number one back. And he had 27 yards tonight. And then Khalil Mullings turned out to be the better back, at least tonight. Alex Orji did not start. I did not see when he was in the game. I just saw part of the game, but they threw for about 115 yards, and they were very conservative. They didn't need to do anything beyond that because they were playing Fresno State, and their defense was giving up virtually nothing. But they're not a great offense right now. They couldn't run the ball until the fourth quarter. So they've got some work to do.
Absolutely. And Donovan Edwards, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a running back before that has as much talent as he does, but his inability to read a hole is unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a guy that is that incapable of being able to run through a hole. Sometimes, I mean, like you said, when he has a great play, the hole is like this large, like anybody could run through it. So I don't know why that is the case with him, but he's never going to be a great running back if he can't get better being able to read defenses and find the holes, because a lot of times they're there and he just doesn't run through them, and it's very unfortunate. Shout out to Vanderbilt. I see Vandy Dandy in chat. Vanderbilt. I picked Virginia Tech. Did not expect that, but I'm happy for Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
They were like one of the only SEC teams that made the SEC look good today. insane.
Yeah, I
So
love it for Vandy, and it's cool that they got a lead, and then once Virginia Tech took over the lead, you just kind of figured, well, that's Vandy. They're not
gonna
going to win
lose.
this game, but for them to score late in the game and then win the game in overtime, good for them. Clark Lee told us a couple of years ago that he was going to have the greatest football program in the country, so I guess this is the first step.
I hope so. It'd be great for him. We'll definitely see where things go. But yeah, there was a lot of teams that definitely disappointed today. UCLA barely surviving. Oregon barely beating Idaho. That was crazy. I mean, they didn't barely beat him, but they didn't look good either. I mean, Gabriel threw like 50 passes.
Yeah, it was 17-14 in the fourth quarter.
Insane. Like, I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to have that in week one. I mean, teams are going to clean stuff up, but yeah, that was crazy. And shout out to Will. I don't know if he's been here yet tonight, but Notre Dame. I said to prove me wrong, Notre Dame, and they did. I went A&M. Good job, Notre Dame. They won a big game. I mean, it's not like the biggest game in the world, but it was a big win. And sorry to Joey Foster in West Virginia Nation. I picked Penn State. I'm glad I did. That was sad. I thought it'd be close. That was sad.
You're Jeffrey, you're going to love, and I hope Joey doesn't get mad at me. I don't think he will, because this isn't that personal or anything. But I texted Joey. I just said, sorry about your team. You know, you look like you have still have a decent team that's going to have a decent season, but Penn State, I just think, is that good. And then Joey responds that he said, well, Clemson got killed today too, and Penn State's just as good as Georgia. I don't think we lost to any. And I went, all I wrote was Penn State is not Georgia. And then Joey went off on how good Penn State is, and I think they're just as good as Georgia. And all I responded again was, Penn State is not Georgia.
Oh my goodness! I mean, Clemson's probably. You would say Clemson's better than West Virginia. They're better.
Yeah,
I mean, they're still better.
They're better. Yeah.
So Georgia is better than Penn State, and Clemson is better than West Virginia. So I don't really. I mean, that argument doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we saw the probable best team in the country beat a team that, you know, Clemson may be off to a really bad season this year. I can't imagine that it can be that bad, 7-5, 8-4, or they may win the ACC. So they're probably the 15th or so best team in the country. So that's what we saw between Georgia and Clemson. What we saw between Penn State and West Virginia is probably like the 10th best team in the country and like the 35th best team in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, too, is that Clemson-Georgia was a neutral site game, whereas Penn State won at West Virginia.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a bad loss for West Virginia, because the fact that it was at home made me think that they had a shot to win. Like, obviously, if the game was at Penn State, I wouldn't even have thought about it. Like the game last year, I didn't think about picking West Virginia at all. But since this one was at West Virginia, I was like, yeah, they got a shot. So I picked Penn State by like 7. But it just was disappointing. Obviously, it wasn't as disappointing as Florida. But I just hate it for West Virginia fans. Because, I mean, Joey, I've heard that he said that they were going to go like 9-3 this year or something like that. And I don't know. That might be a little bullish after today's performance. I don't know their schedule, but they didn't do that good. I mean, it's not like they were awful, but they weren't good. And I thought they would do better than that. I mean, were you more surprised that Penn State went on the road and like destroyed? I wouldn't say destroyed, but they comfortably beat West Virginia, or that Notre Dame beat Texas A&M at all?
Well, I picked Notre Dame to win, so I obviously wasn't surprised, and I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. I've been thinking I don't know if you're like this, but obviously this week 1 is totally different than every other week, because we've been talking Miami against Florida, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Clemson, Georgia. We've been talking about these games for 8 months. They're different than every other week, because not that we don't bring up Ohio State and Oregon and Alabama, Georgia are going to play, but we really don't focus on those games because they're not the first week.
Until the week of it.
And we know that there are going to be games before that are going to change our perspective on those teams. But really, our perception of these teams doesn't change the entire offseason for the most part. And so we've been talking about these matchups forever. So I got to say that I've had it in my brain the entire offseason. Notre Dame's going to win. Notre Dame's going to win. That's my pick. I don't care what the spread is. They're going to win. But I've wavered the last week or two because they had their left tackle get hurt, and they have this young offensive line. And I thought maybe Texas A&M is just going to blow up all their plays, which they pretty much did for the first half. I knew it was going to be a rock fight. I even said, I think, on our Notre Dame show last week, we were talking about it, and I said, can't you guys see this being like 9-6 in the fourth quarter before like somebody makes a play? So I had that in my brain the whole week or the whole off season, and almost changed to Texas A&M, but I was fairly confident with Notre Dame. But what was the other game you brought up?
Penn State, West Virginia.
Oh, the Penn State, West Virginia. This is what a knucklehead I am. Now, I've been saying the entire offseason that there are going to be upsets, so I'm going to try to pick those upsets. And so I said a long time ago, look out for West Virginia at home against Penn State. Just don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. And as we got closer to that game, and when I made my pick last night, I knew in my head, I thought, Penn State's going to win this game. They're considerably better than West Virginia. But I just thought, you know what? There's probably going to be an upset tomorrow. I got to find that upset. And so I went with West Virginia, even though I knew better. And, but no, I was not surprised that Penn State won the way they did. No.
See, and that's the thing, Mark. I was like you. I was trying to pick upsets. And that's why I went with Florida, right? And I know it wasn't like the spread wasn't a massive upset, but I shouldn't have overthought some of those games because in my gut, like I knew Notre Dame was better. I just didn't trust them after the games that they have blown in these recent years, and I was like the home crowd, and then stuff like that. But because I flip flop, like I'm like you, I was not. Outside, you said you were dead set on Notre Dame. I wasn't dead set on any of these games. I've been on them for months, but I flip-flopped a million times. And then at the end of the day, what I ended up picking was wrong in so many instances. I mean, my record's not awful, but I didn't do very good week one. I'm hoping for a better week two because I should have stayed with my original picks.
I even said on our Miami show the other night, I said Miami's got a better quarterback. They've got a better offensive line. Like they've got one of the 5 or 10 best offensive lines in the country. They got Cam Ward at quarterback, who's better than Mertz, although he's loose with the football. Mertz is more consistent going into this game, at least. They got better weapons. They've got a better defensive front. Really, the only place where Miami may not have fixed itself was in the secondary. But I still, despite all that evidence that I fully believed in going into this game, I still just inexplicably picked Florida, even though my brain was telling me Miami's going to win this game.
So you picked Florida too?
Oh yeah, I did.
Oh my goodness. The thing is that I think that your picks came across, because I'm a member right now, and I saw the picks, but I didn't remember that you picked that. Man, I didn't even remember that. So you picked Florida too. So that makes me feel a little better.
Well, I don't feel better about that, but
I don't feel good about it at all.
There, so I got to maintain my record, and it was like you. It wasn't horrible this week. Like it didn't kill me, but it wasn't good. It was roughly 500. I'll have to go back and look.
Well, it stinks when you know better, like you said. Like you knew you should have picked. I knew I should have picked Miami. I knew I should have picked probably Notre Dame, but I didn't. And it's not SEC bias, but it's like it's the home crowd. It's week one. You just don't know what you're going to get. And now we know kind of. It's only 1 week. We have to see more results from these teams to know where they're truly at. But, yes, I mean, it's just tough when it's one game, it's 1 week, and you've been analyzing these games in your head for months, and you just dance around. And then a lot of times you get them wrong, but it's crazy. I'm sure your percentage will go way up. Mine, I don't know. I got to do better though. I mean, I'm over 50%, but it's just disappointing that Florida game is going to be in my mind for a long time.
Well, here's the thing. I've said this a zillion times, and I don't know if you've picked up on this, but I have tracked this for years, and there are usually, and when I say usually, I mean like every week, like clockwork, 4 to 5 upsets in the top 25 out of the 20 or 25 games in the top 25, 4 or 5 upsets. But there were so many mismatches today. I don't know that that happened today. I'm starting to go through, and we only had Notre Dame 3-point underdog won at Texas A&M, and that might be it. So that was the only top 25 upset. Now, the only other upset that I can think of was Vandy is a 13 or 14-point dog winning against Virginia Tech. Not a top 25 game, but a power conference game.
Abilene Christian was close. I mean, that would have been big if they had knocked off Texas Tech. I know nobody probably watched that, but I flipped that game on, and I'm like, Abilene went for 2. It's always a risk, and then they didn't get it in overtime, but that was a game. That's why I love college football. Not just the big games, are the ones that are good. Like, you can get these underrated games. No one's watching them. And then you just see it at the bottom of the screen that it's close, and you just flip it over, and you get the tail end of it. Like, that was a great game. Even though both teams were horrible, especially on defense, it was still a fun game. But that would have been a big upset if it had happened.
The only fun games were the ones that you had to search for today. Texas A&M Notre Dame was the only decent game out of all the big games.
Absolutely. And I mean, the thing is I don't mind when that happens. You want the big games to be good, but I like to flip channels. I do it so much. So like when I'm watching games with people, they get mad because I'm like flipping channels because I want to find the right game. And they're like, why are we watching this Abilene Christian Texas Tech game? I'm like, look at the score. It's close. Like, do you want to watch the blowout over here? Like, watch this game. Like, I know you might not care, but it's a good game. And like, why have all the channels if you don't use them? Anyway.
There you go. All right, Jeffrey.
I appreciate it, Mark. It was a lot of fun having college football back, and we still have tomorrow LSU USC. Looking forward to that, and Monday as well. But it's going to be interesting. Hopefully, our picks and rating, our predictions will start improving as the season goes along. I'm sure definitely yours will, and hopefully the rest of your show goes great. Like and subscribe to the Voice of College Football, everybody. He just passed 45,000. Doing great. Got to get that number up, as Jackson always said. He's a better advertiser, but I try my best as well.
I appreciate that, Jeffrey. Only Talk Sports is where you can find Jeffrey as well, talking college football over there. Jeffrey, good to see you. Have a good night. Thanks for calling.
You too. Thanks, Mark.
Let's get to some of these super chats here. We've got Vandy Dandy. Yes, the 16 seed in the SEC beat the 5 seed in the ACC. Vandy Dandy, whatever you want to say tonight, you can say it because your team never wins. They suck. They're one of the worst programs in history, but they are not that today. Today, in 2024, they are 1-0 with a win against a team that was supposed to be good this year that very well may turn out to be decent. We don't know, but Vanderbilt pulled off a 2-touchdown upset. And so congratulations to you, Vandy Dandy, and all the Vandy fans out there. All 13 of you, congratulations. Maybe you could all convene somewhere and have a big party before next week's game. But I believe you're playing like a nobody next week, so you should go to 2-0. But now we don't know that Vandy's going to be the 16 seed and Virginia Tech's going to be the 5. I don't know where you pulled those numbers from, but they make sense to me. That's fine. All right. And then we've got Adam here. Adam, thank you so much for the contribution. It's very much appreciated, sir. Everyone said that about Georgia last year until they got beat by Alabama, and many thought that Alabama would dominate Michigan and that Michigan would beat TCU. My point is that the popular predictions are often wrong. Sure, they are. The popular predictions are often wrong. I don't think we have had a team outside the top 6 or 7 in the country win the national championship during the college football playoff era. Florida State would have been the last team outside the top 10 that won the national championship. The Jameis Winston year in 2013, I think they were just outside the top 10 at 11. Cam Newton and Auburn, when nobody knew who Cam Newton was, they were number 22 in the preseason poll. I think Georgia Tech, going all the way back to 1990, was the last unranked team. But I know you're not talking about an unranked team with Notre Dame. You're talking about a top 10 team. So you're right. We don't know. We don't know. But college football has been predictable enough to peg a top 5 team to be the eventual champion. Okay, we've got Filet-O-Fish. Thank you for being here, Filet-O-Fish. Penn State got to be in the top 5 of your top 25 for next week. Well, we will see. That'll come out on Tuesday. So what people are referring to, if you have not partaken here at the Voice of College Football during the season, is that we've got a top 25 that actually makes sense. And it is completely different. Be prepared to be shocked, dismayed, frustrated, pissed off, enlightened, whatever you want to say, when you see our top 25 that actually makes sense, because it is based on the performance and results on the field. That's it. That if we knew nothing about these teams, except for we would have to know something, we would have to have some preconceived idea of how good they were going into the season, obviously, because we are rating a win against Clemson to be against whatever we think Clemson is. So there has to be some starting point to this, of course. But I rank these teams based on results. So it is much different, especially to start the season, than other top 25. So, yeah. Did Penn State have one of the top 5 wins of the week? Well, just wait and see. We've got Vandy Dandy, Vanderbilt. Watch out. Would love to see it. Would love to see it. I watched very little of that game, and really what I watched is it was on my third screen. I really didn't take in, can't really analyze, but they took a 2-touchdown lead. They blew it. And then I was happy to see that in the final 2 minutes of the game, they drove down the field in regulation and took it to overtime and got the job done, and then forced Virginia Tech into a 4th down and stopped them. So there you go. We've got Uncle Rico, who's letting us know that Oregon was by far the most disappointing team today. I can't argue with that, but they won the game and they played a nobody. And so they were fortunate that they played nobody. Clemson wasn't so fortunate. So in terms of the result, I would say Florida and Clemson were the most disappointing teams of the day. They had the results that hurt the worst, that were Clemson and Florida posted the performances and the results that, at least just based on this vacuum of 1 week of football, should have the greatest negative impact on their teams going forward. Oregon the last few years has had performances like they had today, and then they've still won the Pac-12 championship or had a major bowl bid or had a good season. Then we've got Seattle Skier. Thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate you being here. Thank you for that. All right. We're finally going to make our way to Mr. Joe Long. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, Joe. You still with us?
Yeah, Mark, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. Sorry to make you wait for so long, but thanks for being here.
That's okay. I'm, as you know, a Notre Dame fan, or as you probably should know by now. But I would give you a shout out to I saw your spring game, Ohio State spring game, and that kid Smith was impressing the hell out of me then. And I didn't watch the game today, but apparently 2 touchdowns, I think.
Yes.
So he's going to be an amazing player. And I also want to put a shout out there to Adam Lamparello, because he's been toting Notre Dame in this chat like I've not seen anyone, especially a USC guy. So thank you, Adam. But I have a question for you, Mark. What do you think was the turning point in the Notre Dame when they took charge at the end of the game? Like I always say, it's like the final 10 minutes, usually the best team steps up. So, what did you think was the turning point for the game?
Well, I agree with your final statement. That's a good one right there. I think we see that a lot among what we think are good teams, and usually they both turn out to be good teams, but one is decidedly better, and it usually proves out later in the season. And we got to see that in the final 10 minutes. This might be a bad example, but it's still a case in point because we saw it a number of times even this weekend, and this is a regular thing in a lesser type game. Wisconsin and Western Michigan. Wisconsin was losing that game in the fourth quarter, and it was like their superior talent, ability, strength, speed, everything just clicked in, and they determined, okay, there's 10 minutes left in the game. We're being outplayed. We're losing by 4. In the next 2 drives, they just boom, touchdown, touchdown, took over the game, won by 2 touchdowns. You see that a lot. But in this game, obviously, we're talking about comparable talent, and we're talking about a lot of NFL players on the field. I'm trying to think of any. I did watch every play of the game, pretty much. Can't think of any kind of sequence. And I
You know
know
what
that they were there. I know that if I usually take notes while I'm watching these games, but I just didn't feel like it. And I knew that would come back to bite me because then I can usually go back and be like, yeah, I note those things. 5:32 left in the game, such and such happened. Yeah, I'm not coming up with, even though a lot of plays are flashing through my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not coming up with any particular play that
Well,
I
let me
think
tell
was
you
a
what I
turning
saw.
point. Okay.
The in the second half, I think Notre Dame went up 13-6, and then Texas A&M came right back and went
Yep.
right down the field and tied it up. But then when Notre Dame started going for those fourth downs at their own like 32, and then again at their own 40 on fourth down, that to me was, like you said, those kids on the offensive line grew up tonight. I think one's game's still a little bit too much to, or not enough to say they've matured at this point. But I think when the coach really gave them that fourth down in their own territory, really gave them a lot of confidence and a boost. I think that maybe they wouldn't have won if he didn't do something like that, because that was crazy. I was like, holy shit, what is he doing, you know? But I think to me that was more of the turning point. It seemed after that too that Leonard seemed to calm down and to play within himself. Like he was very antsy the whole first half. Like he was really a little too jumpy for a guy that should be a senior, you know, and all that experience. So I wasn't real impressed with him. I loved his running. I mean, he's a trooper when it comes to running, but he doesn't seem to have much touch on the ball. Like he kind of floats them, and that's the way Tommy Rees used to play, and that's scary. But those guys were making some great catches for him. So I'm also pretty more impressed with what the wide receiver room looks like. I knew they were going to be pretty good, but compared to last year, they looked really good tonight. And then the only thing they have to really look out for too is penalties. I mean, that was entirely too much. 100 yards in penalties, and Texas A&M only had 45 or something, or that one at the end, I guess they got called for. But
Yeah, and a lot of those penalties were offensive line related, and the rule book is really tough on those big fellas up front because they can't flinch, they can't do anything, and they've got defensive players jumping all over the place and jumping up and down and faking blitzes and doing all those things. So for that level of experience or inexperienced players being up front, I'm not that concerned about that. I think that they'll learn from that and get better in terms of all the false starts that they had up front. I think Kirk Herbstreit actually said it after they kicked the field goal to go up by 2 scores that Marcus Freeman coached a fourth quarter, especially to show I've got faith in you. I've got confidence in you. I'm going to call the game and let you go out and win it.
yeah. Yeah, it showed me some guts and really not only belief in that offensive line, but his coaches. Like his coaches, uh, he put them under the gun. I mean, that Denbrock was tested. Having to go for it twice on a fourth down in your own territory. He was putting his kind of the screws to him. I mean, but anyway, I don't want to. You can move on to other callers if you want, but
No,
I
I
just wanted to
appreciate the
get your
call.
take. Yeah, I just wanted to
Well-
get your take on the where I saw that momentum change was on those fourth down plays. That was
Yeah,
good.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big win for Notre Dame. I don't know that Texas A&M is a great team or anything, but that's a difficult place to play. And they faced really good athletes on the other side.
That's it on their defensive line.
Yeah.
That was shocking to me. I mean, like I knew our running backs were good, but we got that one long one called on Jadarian Price called back, but he then came right back and got another one, and then Love scored some. So I'm really feeling good about everything except for it's still a young offensive line, and then quarterback has to get a little better throwing the ball. I want to see a little bit more confidence in his throws. He seemed a little timid out there for me today.
All right. Very good, Joe. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks,
Hey,
Mark.
thanks for the call. Appreciate your patience tonight. We don't have anyone else on the line. I do not believe we are going to be with you again tomorrow morning because we understand that while some of you are like me and don't get enough sleep, there are some people that, hey, watch the football and then boom, they go to bed. They're used to getting up at 5 o'clock, let's say in the morning during the week. So to stay up late on a Saturday night just to watch football is about all that they can take on. So they don't take in our shows late night. Most of these shows, so this show in particular, gets a lot more views overnight and tomorrow than it does while we're sitting here. But we are going to go live each and every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm going to be back at it here in less than 10 hours, about 9.5 hours at 11 a.m. Eastern time, taking your calls on Sunday morning. All right. Again, the Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. I am just asking, please use the Amazon link if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football. If you could care less that we disappear tomorrow, then do whatever you want. But if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, please use the Amazon link. It's in the description section right under the video. Grab that link and please use it. It is the same shopping experience, same exact as what Amazon link you use. It still keeps track of all your purchases, still keeps track of your account. It is automatic. You are contributing to the Voice of College Football and not just giving all your money to Amazon when you do that. Doesn't cost you a penny. Same shopping experience. Our plan as of right now is in addition to doing our call-in show. See, boy, the last 3 days, I got to tell you, I'm going to stay up even later tonight because I want to catch up on stats and summaries of games and highlights and all that business. But I should probably just curl up in a ball in the corner and go to sleep because starting with that, even the day before the 24-hour marathon, I think I did about 10 hours on here. And then we did the 24-hour marathon, which I understand was only about 15 or 16 hours, but still 15 or 16 hours. And then that was off a 2-hour sleep. And then Friday was something similar to that. And so then today was, get up early and get into the football. And here we are with you. So sometimes the mouth doesn't work too well under those circumstances or the brain. But so the deal is call-in show in the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And the intent there is to lead you into the NFL kickoffs, which I understand is not tomorrow, but throughout the rest of the season. And if we've got a good enough response, we'll, of course, stay on through the NFL kickoffs. And but it's more about those people that don't stay up late on Saturday night, and we'll provide you a opportunity to call in on Sunday mornings, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Also, after USC and LSU, I will be right here when the clock hits double zeros. Matt Zemek and myself right here to take your calls after USC and LSU wrap it up. And then on Monday, I'm almost certain I am going to the Florida State Boston College game. And what I'm going to attempt to do is load up the gear, head to Tallahassee, and set up a tailgate. And we've got our buddy James Coleman. He's there. He's generous with his time and his territory out there. So he's got a setup out there in which we can plug in. We got the Wi-Fi. We got the electricity. We can set up out there. And we will go live from Tallahassee before the game, after the game. After the game, I'm driving all night. So we will see. But we will be there live, most likely. That's the plan on Monday from Tallahassee. Okay. Anything else, Mark? Anything else? Anything else? Yeah. The College Football Show. Every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. My rants, your calls, your comments, your questions, and great guests every day, Monday through Friday. All right. That should about do it. Check out our X page, meaning Twitter, and then Voice of College Football bets. Steve Merrill, once again today, he ran his record to 22-5 since 2022 on his under the radar picks against the spread. 22-5 for Steve Merrill. Where can you get those selections? Where do you ask? Well, before I leave you, I want to make sure we don't miss any super chats. So we will interrupt my pitch there. Erica, so I guess you didn't watch Iowa. Well, I got to say, Erica, Iowa was not necessarily a priority today when you've got the likes of Clemson and Georgia, Miami and Florida playing and so forth. No, I did not see. I had it on my phone. It was running on YouTube TV on my phone, and my phone was like sitting on the couch next to me, but it was just, and every so often I'd look at it, but really got nothing out of it. So no, I did not watch Iowa. If I do my due diligence, I will watch at least the highlights by the time Corey and I get together on Tuesday. Although, considering it's Illinois State, even that is doubtful. But no, I did not watch Iowa. We can only watch so much football at one time. There's like 15 games on at the same time, at least. So, sorry about that. No Iowa watching for me, but I will watch them play Iowa State, especially depending on who else they're playing against. But that will definitely, regardless of who else is playing at the same time, that will be one of my games that I will watch. I believe that's the CBS game at 3:30 Eastern. So I will watch Iowa State coming up this week. Adam, did we pick up on this? Mark, Jeffrey is a real talent with a very bright future, intelligent, fact-based, and has a great personality. I completely agree. Absolutely, Adam. I could not agree more. What I would rather do is put Jeffrey up here at 1 o'clock in the morning and pay him to host the show. So, so Adam, anytime you want to tell me that and throw us $20, you are more than welcome to do that. But Jeffrey's awesome. All right. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you in 9.5 hours. And once again, Steve Merrill, 22-5 against the spread. And where can you get his picks? Well, of course, college football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, But you can't miss Steve's weekly under the radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.